background. Do you think I want to be working in PR? You think that's what I want to be doing? I don't want to work in PR. But the fucking PR of the left is fucking shit. So I have to make a YouTube channel to convince the public that you need to tax the rich.
I want you just to show numbers.
Listen, I'm out there getting 50 million views a month on YouTube. You want me to start a think tank as well? I tell you what, when I'm at it, why don't I start a political party? Listen, I'm not fucking Superman. What do you want me to do?
You never show any numbers. Like I showed you more graphs today than maybe you've shown on your whole YouTube channel. So where are your numbers? I think you're a populist, Gary.
Today, I'm going to be answering questions from the honesty box. I wish I was still able to reply to all the comments, but there's just too many comments nowadays.
I listened to the entire audiobook of the Trading Game. So I inevitably have been colored for that, for good and bad, in terms of, background knowledge. But I could tell you Gary's background quite well from that book, is that he presents it as that he came from a very working class background in Ilford.
You don't fight for your share, you won't get your share. Go look at what life is like in Nigeria and Brazil and India for ordinary people. Yeah, that will happen here if we don't fight. I do order from Amazon, Listen, I'm a fucking busy guy, man.
So about 4 months ago, I had made a video about Gary Stevenson. And at the time, some people were mad that Andrew Tate had spoken out about him. And so the thing is, I wanted to like Gary Stevenson because his message is all about how to improve inequality. And he's getting very popular on YouTube as a spokesperson for the working man and as someone that understands economics and the economy. That's the image he's trying to portray. And I started watching his videos and I joined his Discord server. That's where I found out his audience seems to be predominantly male, and it seems to be mainly only men talking about this, which is why I wanted to make another video from a female perspective. Most people in that Discord server were discussing how they could make money through investing, because most young people today cannot afford to buy a house. And most people in there were not talking about how we were going to improve equality. And this is not something that Gary really explains either, other than that we should have a wealth tax, which is a vague concept. His main priority is to grow his audience and to get people to donate, without really showing us what he's going to do with that money and without showing how it will help to improve wealth inequality. And so what I've realized now is I'm not the only one that thinks Gary is a bit of a fraud, because when I did some research, I found out that he's an influencer. He is represented by an agency that represents makeup artists and other influencers, and some of the worst influencers like James Charles and Jake Paul. These are the same people that get paid thousands of pounds or dollars to promote really useless products that make rich people richer. So Gary is a bit of a hypocrite, to say the least. And he's also sponsored by Penguin Books, who are owned by a huge German media conglomerate who once had connections to the Nazi party, who probably pay as little tax as they can get away with, and they're not based in this country. And he doesn't talk about any of this in his interviews or chats. Not surprisingly, it would be a bit awkward. But a few podcasters seem to be catching on to some of the contradictions and the inaccuracies in how he's trying to portray himself. And unfortunately, it's come to my attention that behind the scenes, he's getting worse. I do believe that he is conning his audience. And the cracks are starting to show, because he's been losing his temper in some of these interviews.
Is there actually any science to trading, or is it just gambling? People who ask this question, listen, you read my book, there's a guy in the book, it's called Billy, who was a fucking genius trader, didn't go to university, came from a working class background, and he was the best trader every single year I was there, except for the 1 year that I beat him. You and me can sit here and say, oh, maybe he's just gambling, maybe he's just lucky, Maybe Cristiano Ronaldo is just fucking lucky. Maybe he just fucking lucks at every single fucking game. Maybe Messi's just fucking lucky. Listen, these questions are so fucking nihilist when people ask shit like this. Listen, some people are actually good at shit. Some people understand shit. Do you want to listen to them or not?
You seem riled up by that one.
No, because you know what? I get these economists all the time, right? All the time, these posh middle class economists that get everything wrong every year. And then when I say to them, why you get everything wrong every year, they say, oh, it's impossible to get everything right. And I'm like, well, I get it right every year. Are you going to listen to me or not? And then they just say, no, you're just fucking lucky. And then they just fucking destroy the economy. It's me off.
So I don't think it's the economists that are destroying the economy. It's the investment banking system we have that controls our global economy. which is built on debt and exploitation. And we have an economic system where people at the bottom have to do exploitative jobs, like working for Amazon, that he said he uses in order to be able to survive. And I'm not an economist, and I'm not good at maths, but I've had my own business my whole life, and most people grow their business by getting into debt to bank. I know that trading is exactly like gambling from doing my own research. In 2021, he's literally saying his job was to bet on the global economy.
Interest rates go up when the economy is strong and down when the economy is weak. So basically my job was to bet on the strength of the global economy. Now, when I started working in 2008, there was a global financial crisis and all the rates in the whole world came down to zero. So very quickly, my job was to bet on when will the rates recover, which is basically a bet on when will the global economy recover.
I mean, first off, the fact that banks make money out of bets, is that not part of the problem? Because what is betting? It's a game that puts people into debt. But then Gary wants us to believe that he's an expert because he's an influencer. Gary has built his brand on telling people what they want to hear, because he says when he left the bank, he worked for a think tank, which we're going to get onto. And he's using his working class, humble background to make people believe they can trust him because he's just like them. And when I made my last video giving a little bit of critique, I had people coming into my comments telling me what a great job he was doing. So there's a podcast called Decoding the Gurus, and they are one of a few that are onto him, and they've been calling him out for his lack of integrity when he claims to be a guru, because he never shows any receipts for his arguments. And one of them read his book, So I Don't Have To, where he said he grew up in a house where they didn't have a table or a shower.
I could tell you Gary's background quite well from that book, is that he presents it as that he came from a very working class background in Ilford. And when I say working class, it includes things that he didn't have a shower, had to connect the hose pipe to make the shower work, didn't have a table to study on, had to use a plank of wood.
No, right? Table.
There are issues of this which seem to be somewhat self-mythologizing, because, I'm not from a stunningly well-off background in Belfast, and I found few people that I knew in my network that did not have access to tables. But nevertheless, set that aside. But
so not having a table or a shower. He lived in Ilford, which isn't one of the most deprived areas, but it sounds like things were very hard. But then in the Lad Bible Q&A, he said his parents had financial security because of investing and owning a house. So yeah, something's not adding up in this storyline.
Look how bad it was 100, 200 years ago, even in a country like this, the UK. And look at the improvements were made up until the late 20th century, 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s. Has come from a lot worse place than we are now to a decent life. It wasn't perfect, but people like my parents could have financial security. So we did it before.
And the thing about this argument is it literally reminds me of the Conservatives in the 80s when they were like, get on your bike and get a job, at a time when the manufacturing industry in this country was coming to an end. So there was massive job loss and people having to move at the time of a huge consumer and credit boom going on. And many people were out of work. And we now have generations of families that have not had jobs. And even if the government was to get this new income generated by the wealth tax, how do we know it's going to be spent on public services? How do we know it's going to affect our quality of life in any way? I'm not going to get into a whole economical history in this video, but I would expect Gary to be a little bit more informed, given that he went to university and I did not. So when they had the Industrial Revolution 100 years ago, that is when they started to register what is called wealth inequality. The concept of financial security, which used to be obtained from getting a job and having a pension plan. But then we had people like Philip Green, who literally robbed his company pension money. For years now, people's pensions have been used on the stock market and they've been misused and money has been lost. Actually, the first time I saw Gary on a video, he was talking about using a pension fund to trade with on the stock exchange for his job. And there were so many financial scams, and having a mortgage and being in debt is a huge cause of family and mental health breakdown, which goes back to after the war, when the ultra capitalism of owning your own home, owning a car and all this other stuff was promoted. And that was because the British European and American empires were not allowed to colonize the rest of the world anymore, allegedly. A point which Gary completely ignores in all his discussions.
At the beginning of the 20th century, extremely high inequality in places like here, the UK, also in places like the US. We changed our tax systems, we redistributed, we ended up in a situation where ordinary families could own their homes, could own stocks and shares, and ordinary people could live decent lives and go on holidays. So we have done it before. It's not impossible, but it is difficult.
So then he goes on this other podcast, which is discussed on decoding the gurus. And this guy really puts him on the spot about his lack of data or receipts. Because when they look at a graph of measured inequality levels from the last 100 years, Gary is pressed. And this is meant to be the humble guy that's explaining economics to people. But instead he just gets into an argument about why he doesn't have to show proof of what he's saying.
You never show any numbers. Like I showed you more graphs today than maybe you've shown on your whole YouTube channel. Is that because you don't trust the surveys or because it doesn't fit your simplistic view of things?
Listen, probably you already know this, right? But I'll tell you how these numbers work, all right? There's right-wing think tanks and there's left-wing think tanks. And they want to get the numbers that they want and they pay the money to the economists and they get the numbers that they fucking want. That's how economics works. You know,
this is look, we're looking at a new one now from Equality Trust. The previous one was Fairness Foundation. So if these guys have any kind of bias, it's in your direction. And these guys,
do you think
these are the top last 100 years of wealth inequality, and it's basically gone down, right? And it's gone the wealth share of the bottom, what is it? Bottom 10% has gone up, and the
since 1900,
the bottom 50%. Yeah, I could only find data till 2020.
Yeah, to be clear,
so things are much better in general.
Than they were in 1900.
No, than they were in 1980. Or they're the same as they were. No, they're much better. Look at the red line. See things, they're kind of like they were in 1980.
Well, I've already covered this. I think the top 0.1% is very undercalculated.
Okay, so you think the top 10% is not a good metric? We should be looking at the top 0.1%.
It's not about whether you look at the top 10% or whether you look at the top 0.1%. It's about whether your numbers are good or not.
Okay, so where are your numbers?
Listen, I'm out there getting fucking 50 million views a month on YouTube. You want me to start a think tank as well? I tell you what, when I'm at it, why don't I start a political party? Listen, I'm not fucking Superman here. What do you want me to do?
I want you just to show numbers.
And then who makes the videos, Thomas? Who makes the videos?
Oh, you can hire someone to...
Make the videos?
No, hire someone. Listen, I want to show people that wealth inequality is rising.
So I already made the point in the last video that Gary uses a production team on these videos. He always has. These have always been shot with a professional camera and an editor when he could just use his phone or buy his own camera and do his own edits like a lot of other YouTube channels. He actually insults the cameraman on one of his videos, which is not great when you're meant to be a man of the people.
You know, I could pull out a big fucking graph and slap you on the face with it if I want. You know, you're a cameraman, you're not trained to understand economics graphs, you know what I mean?
But this YouTube channel is Gary's business, and he's always asking for more money to pay for things to make the business grow, like staff.
If we want to be politically powerful down the line, we're going to need staff, and if we need staff, we're going to need funding. Just help support me and help us to get a little bit more ambitious and diverse with the creativity of what we do. Help us to work with different creatives. Help us to get different people on the channel, so it's not just like me every week in my no-face hoodie.
Listen, help me get that data.
My last video I did before I came out was a shout out to these think tanks. What the fuck are you doing? Where are you? Where are you? Listen, I'm one guy. And I think I'm having a lot of impact. I could choose. I was working for the think tank. I worked for a think tank doing this kind of stuff in London. And I could see they weren't going to get anywhere. So I left. I could see what we needed was a YouTube channel. So I started a YouTube channel. I'm working on a YouTube channel. I don't work for a think tank anymore. Listen, there's 75 think tanks in London that should be doing this shit. And I'm trying to talk to them to get them to do this shit. But I can't do it all. You know, listen.
Yeah, but come on. I had 1 day to prepare this and I found 10 graphs.
Listen. Did you make those graphs? Listen, if you want me to bring up... Listen, I told you.
I don't want you to make the graphs.
Yeah.
I just want you to show some graphs.
Listen, I worked in the sausage factory, okay? Listen, I know these graphs are bullshit. I know the graphs are all bullshit. I know.
From Fairness Foundation and from Equality.
Listen, all of the graphs are bullshit.
Okay.
But you know that. You know that. Come on, you know that. You know the graphs are bullshit.
If they're based on a survey, I understand your critique. But if they're based on different data points, maybe, I don't know, you're the economist.
Okay, let me ask you a question. How many traders do you think are looking at these graphs?
I have no idea.
That many. Zero. These graphs are not for the economists. They're not for the traders. They're for the public. They're bullshit. Traders want to know what's happening. Listen, when I was a trader and I was making, tens of millions of dollars a year for the bank, you think they asked me to bring up graphs? No, the reason they back me is because I'm right again and again. You want to know evidence? Go and watch my first video on my channel.
The COVID one.
June 2020.
I
What does it say?
One. Yeah.
It says that there's going to be a cost of living crisis, an inflation crisis, a massive increase in prices, of the gold price, of stock prices, of housing prices. Was I right on every single one of those predictions?
Seems to me, yeah.
Yeah. The same guy who was right on every single one of his predictions in 2011 was right on every single one of his predictions in 2020. And that's why banks pay me millions of pounds to manage their money. Now I'm out here telling people for free on YouTube what's going to happen. I don't need to do that. I could get paid millions of pounds a year to not tell you. Okay, I'm telling you. And okay, if you want me
that's another issue.
Yeah, if you want me to draw a graph, listen, I'll find you 10 geeks to draw a graph. They're bullshit. The graphs are bullshit.
So what are you basing what do you base yourself on?
Actual genuine understanding.
So, but where does the idea wealth inequality is rising? Where does it come from?
From
what
the
are the
fact
premises?
that ordinary families and governments' wealths are collapsing.
So it has to be going somewhere.
Where do you think it's going? You think it's disappearing?
Okay, I'm just curious.
Yeah, listen, if you
it's
want to
because
know,
it has to be going somewhere. So that's your main argument.
We cannot accurately measure the wealth of the very rich. It's very, very difficult. We have economists doing that. If you want, there's an economist, French guy, Gabriel Zucman. He's really good. Bring him on. His French accent is quite strong, but he's a good economist. He's doing that. He can do that, What we can see is falling living standards. And what we can see, look at the numbers. Look at European government wealth. Look at it. Go and get the graphs of European government wealth. Where's it gone? It's collapsed. European governments used to hold significant amount of wealth. Now it's massively negative. And then look at the increased size of debt of your average Western European family. Who's it to? We can see, what we see is the collapsing wealth of the middle class and the collapsing wealth of governments. That is what we can see. That is what is obviously true. The statistics don't show you where it's gone because it's gone to a group of people who are very difficult to measure. Listen.
Yeah, but maybe
honestly, I find it frustrating because I worked with these think tanks,
Mm-hmm.
right? And I know it's all bullshit. I went on Diary of a CEO and they put out these graphs and these graphs. And all of these numbers, then some left-wing think tank gets hold of them and it discredits them. And everything is all biased. It's all bullshit. It's all fucking PR bullshit.
Yeah, but
I bet my fucking money on it and I'm right year after year. And listen, who do you think? Listen, the rich, they pay these think tanks, these guys 50, 60 grand a year to make graphs, to make statistics. They pay me £2 million a year to manage their fucking money. Who do you think they fucking trust?
But they're not paying Fairness Foundation, bro.
Listen, I know the guys at Fairness Foundation. They're good guys. Listen, all of these economic statistics, I know how they work. These guys, they know the graph they're going to get before they fucking do the data. And they fuck it around to get what they want, The guys, I know the guy who runs Fairness Foundation. He's a good guy and he's trying to do good things. But, banks don't pay guys to draw graphs. They pay guys to be right. They pay guys like me to be right. Go and watch my videos. Look at the predictions. You think I just pull these out of my ass? Listen. And listen, if you want bullshit graphs, then I can give you a list of 50 think tanks making bullshit graphs. But they're not getting 50 million views a month on YouTube. I'm doing what I think is effective.
Right.
So what Gary is not telling you in any of these videos is he has started a think tank, or at least I think that's what this is, because he has registered it as a corporation in 2025, and it says nature of business, information technology service activities and advertising agencies. This is his partner Oscar Webb, who used to work for a lobbying group called Tax Justice UK, and now they've joined forces with another lobbying group called Patrioticmillionaires, which is funny because their financial records show they're nowhere near in the millionaire status. Part of Gary's rhetoric is that he could be getting paid £2 million a year from the bank, but he's giving you the information for free. And so according to these records, they have put £11,000 into this business, which is owned by a bunch of shareholders. And so, yeah, I think he should be sharing this information with his audience who are financially supporting him along with his advertising revenue on YouTube, especially when he's marketing himself as a how to make money course leader. Why does he appear on this Millionaires for Humanity website if he's not a millionaire? And why is it associated with Nigel Farage? Because isn't Gary meant to be on the left? And since when did millionaires care about humanity? They wouldn't be millionaires. For one thing, this is a lobbying group that has been going for 13 years. It was started by the heir to Disney, and their marketing reminds me of Brexit adverts. And we all know how that worked out. And I hate to agree with GB News, but they do make the valid point, which is if millionaires want to pay more tax, there's nothing to stop them. But they use it as a premise to raise more money, because a lobbying group is a policy influencer and they run by taking donations. In other words, it's a low-key form of propaganda distribution.
You're saying, hands up, we want to pay more tax.
Absolutely we are. We're saying, come on, tax us, we can afford it, we're not going to go hungry.
How much more do you want to be taxed?
Well, we have some detailed proposals and so on, but I mean, basically the economic bit is that we're looking for a kind of 2% over wealth of 3.6 million or something like that. So it's not an enormous amount, frankly. It's not going to make anybody poor overnight, but over time, obviously, it will contribute to a lot to the economy.
Why don't you just pay it? I mean, nobody's stopping you. I mean, you could tomorrow write a cheque to HMRC and say, here's my voluntary contribution to the Exchequer. So nobody's stopping you from doing that. So why don't you just do it? Some people might say this is a bit of virtue signalling because they know they're not paying it, they don't have to pay it, and it's easy for them to say.
So reading between the lines, I'm getting the idea that this is a way to get people to pay more tax who can't afford to leave the country, because the wealthier you are, the easier it is to avoid paying tax and hide assets. So this is never going to work. Gary, more than anyone else, knows that. And that reminds me, isn't he always out of the country for half the year? And that's the reason why he doesn't show any data. He made a video called Debates Don't Work. Is that a response to where he's being called out for his BS? And I've already pointed out that he doesn't answer his comments. He says it's because there's too many, but he's never answered his comments, even when he started his channel. Some of them are really long and most of them are complimentary. And if you've watched any of my other videos, I've looked deeply into comments, who's writing them, where do they come from? And we are living in a system where millions of dollars is spent on manipulating comments. This is not a conspiracy. My experience of his Discord server was it was extremely pro-capitalism, and anyone that said anything uncomplimentary was immediately shut down. So in the Debates Don't Work video, he's doubling down by saying how to convince your friends to vote for a wealth tax. It's starting to sound a bit like a CULT. And one of the reasons I've made this video is I am very interested in economics, and if anyone wants to ask me onto their channel, I'll happily speak about it from my own experience, but they won't, because in case you haven't noticed, we're all being pushed into these right or left agendas, and people are wondering, how have we ended up with a not socialist left-wing government in power? Well, it's because of these kind of investment-backed lobbying groups. And that's why I'm calling Gary a liar, because he says he is there to empower people.
One of the things which I would like to achieve with this channel is making people feel like empowered, like they have the right to speak about the economy and be listened to, and ordinary people to have the right to say it's getting worse for me and my family.
If he really wanted to make people feel empowered, then he would give them the opportunity to debate him and to listen to what they have to say. But instead, if anyone does contradict him, he gets kind of angry. And then he says, well, they don't know what they're talking about because they're posh middle class. Which I get it, because a lot of posh people can be patronising and annoying, like most of the people that were in the Conservative government. But being judged is one of the things that Gary said was a problem more than not having money. Gary's argument is that he's always right, he was paid to be right, and then don't question me, which sounds a little bit like a fascist. And comparing himself to Russell Brand is not a good look.
Russell Brand, who are you to edit a political magazine?
Well, I just suppose like a person who's being politely asked by an attractive woman.
You remember back when Russell Brand was trying to get into like politics, and he went on Newsnight with Evan Davies, who's Oxford PPE graduate, so he studied economics at Oxford. And this guy went on and he was like talking about how living standards are falling and life is getting worse and all this kind of stuff, which I agree with and I think is important. And Evan Davies pulled up on his little TV behind him a 150-year graph of like, I think it was GDP per capita or like wage growth over time.
I don't want to look at a graph, mate. I ain't got time for a bloody graph.
And like and he goes, sorry, my 150-year graph says you're wrong and life is getting better. And this is why people feel like they can't have opinions on the economy.
It's not like people don't feel like they can have an opinion on the economy. It's the lobbying groups which influence public opinion by giving people like Gary money to make these points on loads of media platforms. And then the people with the most money who manipulate the system to escape justice. People like Russell Brand. That's what we don't see talked about. And Russell Brand did the same thing, gaining popularity by saying he was for the people. But then when he got found out as a rapist, he switched to being on the far right and becoming religious. And this is all to prove the point that Gary doesn't need graphs to back up his wealth tax argument. I'd say it was a fail.
You know, Russell Brand doesn't understand graphs. Okay, I don't know the guy, but you know, probably he doesn't, right? You know, like, you know, I could pull out a big fucking graph and slap you on the face with it if I want. You know, you're a cameraman, you're not trained to understand economics graphs, you know what I mean? It's absurd. So I think people often think that I hate bankers and rich people. But
I don't think you hate rich people because you're definitely hanging out with them like the Disney heiress. But way to not prove a point unless you're attracting dumb people that like Russell Brand. I said he was like Andrew Tate in my last video and it looks like I was right. If you want to give Gary Stevenson your hard-earned money, or maybe not so hard-earned money, then go for it. But if you think he's going to do anything to change our society, then you are going to be disappointed. Look at this statement from Millionaires for Humanity. Gary knows that extreme inequality is not an accident, it's a choice. Remember when Kanye West said slavery was a choice? I'm sick of these people dominating our algorithms because the reality is Gary and his global network of fake millionaires are not going to build a future where everyone thrives. They're going to build a future where they continue to thrive, and while the people around them who do real work will continue to get paid much less than them. And some of the channels that they go on to promote themselves are equally sus. They were all up in arms when Andrew Tate spoke up against him. They were like, oh my god, he's attacking someone on the left. Is he really on the left? Because to me, he sounds like he'd be suited more on the far right. These channels that say, oh, you can't trust mainstream media anymore, give us your money, but then they're in league with lobbying groups that are funded by millionaires. Make it make sense.